For 4 years, I've been telling you that I think this federal government is rotten to its very core. Last night, President Trump confirmed it. He dropped about 300 pages of formerly classified information that is nothing less than a bombshell. Not only did China meddle in our 2020 elections, but the FBI and the CIA knew that they were doing it, did nothing about it, except they intentionally did not tell President Trump. Well, it came as no surprise to me, and I don't think it came as a surprise to my friend Bob Cheeley, who was the lead lawyer on the case of Jeffords, Satir, and Perdue against the Fulton Board of Elections, nor do I think it came as a surprise, perhaps, to Janice Johnston. She is a medical MD and a former member of the Georgia Elections Board. They join us here on The Truth today to unpack what President Trump laid on the American people last night. I thought it was historical. I thought it was earth-shattering. And I want to start by asking both of you, do you think that you will get an apology from Patricia Murphy and Greg, what's his name, from the AJC, calling you election deniers and spreading these false rumors that President Trump was cheated out of the 2020 election without evidence? What do you think, Bob?
Well, that's what I've suspected since I first saw video from State Farm Arena when they were pulling cases out from under the tables after they told everybody they were suspending the counting of the votes on the night of November 3rd, 2020, and sent everybody home under the false premise that there was a water main break, which was absolutely false. So I just wonder why the media never asked to see that water main break. And when you're talking about a water main, that's a 6 to 8 inch pipe going into a facility the size of State Farm Arena. And so ever since then, we've been battling Fulton County to have access to those 149,000 purported absentee ballots. And we got a court order on January the 6th, 2021, while all the things were going on in Washington. We had a local judge enter an order at our request to preserve all those absentee ballots and the envelopes so that we could do an audit. And then on May the 21st of 2021, he granted, after hearing testimony from our experts, he granted our motion to unseal the ballots and allow us to proceed with a plan to do the audit. However, Fulton County hired a criminal defense attorney, high-profile criminal defense attorney, to parachute in the case the next week, and he filed a motion to dismiss for lack of standing, just as the Democrat-controlled blue states had done in 60 some odd other lawsuits nationwide. And unfortunately, that judge reversed himself, and 3 months later, in October of 2021, he dismissed the case, saying that people of Georgia don't have standing to do an audit to hold government accountable.
He also found that candidates didn't have standing.
Yeah,
and if electors don't have standing and candidates don't have standing, who's left to contest a fraudulent or an election fraught with misdeeds?
Yeah, and it certainly turns what our founders of our Constitution and our country had in mind, is that government is there to serve the people, and these kind of lack of standing decisions are cowardly way out, I believe, and basically it says that the people serve the government.
Well, the disappointing, one of the many disappointing things to me is that the media continue to say 63 courts reviewed the data or the information and concluded that President Biden was the duly elected president. And it's just a lie. 63 courts threw the cases out on standing. And except for Brian Amaro, and I think there was a case in Wisconsin, there were no evidentiary hearings on the 2020 election, to my knowledge.
Well, Judge Amaro, who was assigned to preside over the case against Fulton County, he announced from the bench after hearing from our experts on May 21st, 2021, that we had established basically prima facie evidence, which is like probable cause, to have the ballots unsealed and examine those ballots and the envelopes. There should be a 1-to-1 ratio of ballots to envelopes. And, we had eyewitnesses who saw some of these ballots, like Susie Voiles, and there was photographs of those ballots, and many of those ballots that were stacked up on tables that Susie was pointing to in these photographs for Joe Biden had never been folded. They were flat and they were pristine. So we wanted to see those ballots. The Georgia Supreme Court agreed with us that we were entitled to see the ballots. And but ever since that decision by the Georgia Supreme Court, I believe it was in December of 2023, Fulton County has continued to put up one roadblock after another to keep us from looking at these ballots, that in spite of the fact that they shouted from the rooftops that this was the most secure and free election in the history of the county and the state.
Well, Dr. Janice Johnston was a citizen who became an activist, who I first met in Judge Amaro's court when the case that Bob and Charles Bundren and Preston Halliburton were litigating went before Judge Amaro. Dr. Johnston, your activism led you to become nominated and appointed to the state elections board, where you've served for the better part of 4 years, maybe longer, until you recently stepped down. What did you think of President Trump's address to the nation last night? Were you surprised by what he said, or did it just confirm what you believed you already knew?
Well, John, thanks for having me on first. And yes, I did listen to the speech. And as I just told a group just a few minutes ago, the first listening of the speech I thought was interesting. But it was when I listened to the speech the second time, I played the whole speech back again and realized how important and impactful what President Trump was saying as he outlined the 5 areas of evidence and concern that he wants to address and investigate further. It is really quite alarming, and what I'll be most interested in, I know the DHS is going on public today with some more announcements, and it will be interesting to review the documents and as they're released to the public and see what the findings are. But the alarming thing, as you probably all agree, is the intervention or hiding of these findings by our agencies, and did not share that with the president or other necessary parties, and certainly not the public.
Well, I don't know how you can conclude anything other than that they were in on it. 53 intelligence officers signed a letter saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. I mean, when you put all the evidence together, Bob, doesn't that make more than a prima facie case that there are elements within our own government that actively participated in the 2020 election steal, which I think we can now comfortably say without anyone saying that we're election deniers? I think we're truth tellers.
Well, I think that the FBI and the DOJ right now have all the evidence that they need in order to determine what, how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together. And, as a lawyer, my gut told me that when I watched, the State Farm Arena ballots being counted at 5 different scanners, they would scan one batch of ballots of 100 in one scanner and then take them to another scanner and scan them again. And so that's all been verified now that they were double counting votes.
One
so every
stack, I
time-
believe you related to me, was scanned 32 times.
Yep.
That's
So-
3,200 ballots
And there were
or votes.
there were 17,800 and something votes that were tacked on to the total that didn't even have any ballots to go with them. So it was just, and they assigned about 13,600 and something of those votes to Biden. I don't care who wins. I just want to make sure that the process is legal and that there's no domestic or foreign interference. And I think that Dr. Johnson feels the same way.
Well, as do I. The franchise is the pillar of our republic. Without the franchise, we have no semblance of a republic, let alone a democracy. Dr. Jan, were there any omissions in last night's speech that disappointed you or that surprised you that President Trump did not talk about?
Well, John, at first, as I said, I thought it was more of a broad overview, and I did not know what to expect. I did not know if the president was going to be more specific and name particular states or particular jurisdictions or even certain people in his findings. But I think he gave the broad brush picture of what we need to look at further. And what he raised and what he's going to provide will only raise many more questions that need to be answered about what happened in 2020. But even more importantly now is what is happening in our elections today, or what will happen in our future elections. Whatever has been taking place, we need to know what it is and how it's happened and how we can stop it. So we will not have an insecure election, an untrusted election, and unreliable results, perhaps.
So
I never understood why the judge in Mr. Cheeley's case did not go right to the ballots, and I never understood. I have to this day don't understand why the state and the county and the judiciary has been so opposed to just simply looking at the ballots. If Mr. Cheeley's questions had been answered in 2021, as he had very diligently and prudently asked, we might not be here today scratching our heads and wondering still what went on and what's the conclusion of those questions. Why didn't they just open the ballot box and let Mr. Cheeley and his team review those ballots?
Well, speaking of which, I was privileged to be part of that team. I did not work as a lawyer on Bob's case, although I did stay up until 2 a.m. reviewing his brief before the Georgia Court of Appeals. I got tired and went to bed, but he and his fellow lawyers stayed up until 5 a.m. When I woke up, they were just having coffee, having slept through the night. So you worked really hard, Bob, to bring this case across the line. What do you think? I mean, Judge Amaro seemed to be doing the right thing. He was listening. He was attentive, as you pointed out. He ruled that you had made a prima facie case in May of 2021. What caused him to change his mind and so dramatically do a 180 just a few months later and throw the case out on standing. What do you think?
It would be total speculation on my part, but I know he's no longer on the bench. He's gone into private practice with a company as their general counsel. But I don't know. I mean, when I first saw his order, which was basically a 180, where he basically granted the county's motion to dismiss for lack of standing. We had shown, I thought, really well in our brief opposing that motion that citizens do have a right under our Constitution to hold government accountable and to examine ballots, particularly based upon the evidence that we had shown the judge that I've just previously alluded to about these highly irregular and improper procedures that Fulton County had engaged in that looked like they were packing the voting box. But
So
I wouldn't be surprised if he was getting pressure, from the Merrick Garland's DOJ to get rid of this case. It was one of the last ones still pending in the country, and to move on.
well, I would tend to agree with you. I'm not sure that there wasn't direct pressure from some levels in the Georgia government hierarchy, which is kind of my suspicion, but regardless, it is what it is. So those ballots, those absentee ballots that Judge Amaro ordered be unsealed and allow your team to inspect, the inspection never occurred because he would never provide the date, time, and place of inspection. But it's my sense that that has always been where the smoking gun really resides, and a whole lot of other places. But that would be the demonstrable proof positive that you might be able to unravel the riddle if you got to inspect those. Or now we believe in Quantico, Virginia. I was hopeful that last night President Trump would talk about the inspection of the absentee ballots. And once again, I was left mildly disappointed that it didn't become part of his speech. Your thoughts? Are we ever going to get to see those ballots and learn once and for all whether there was demonstrable fraud in those ballots?
I absolutely think we will, and I know that it's high at the top of the president's list of things that he wants to accomplish for the benefit of the country to secure our elections going forward. And I back when we were handling the case and we got that good order from Judge Amaro on May 21st, 2021, we had document examiners lined up, about 8 or 10 of them, to go through and make professional decisions about the authenticity and validity of those ballots. And unfortunately, Fulton County, refused to allow us to do it. And even after the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that we were entitled to do it, they continued to frustrate and refuse to cooperate. And the next thing they threw up as a roadblock is a huge, almost a $500,000 demand that be paid by the citizens to do the audit that the Supreme Court of Georgia had ordered be done.
Well,
John?
Susie Voy, yes.
Let me
Yes,
remind you, there are others that also want the ballots. The state election board requested the ballots to complete an investigation that had been incompletely investigated. And to the point that the state election board subpoenaed the ballots. The state election board has subpoena power and subpoenaed the ballots, which was, and the documents. And this was immediately met by legal opposition from the county to quash the motion, and a motion to quash, sorry. And it's been tied up in court. Although the judge McBurney said, indeed, the state election board has a right to get the documents and to review and complete the investigation. But we too were met with the roadblock of a potential charge of $400,000, over $400,000, just to access the ballots or maybe even a copy of the ballots, which is completely unacceptable. And
Bob, sorry,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Dr. Johnston. Does a respondent or a defendant in a lawsuit have any justification or legal grounds for demanding compensation for delivering evidence that's been ordered by a court?
No.
Have you thought about going back to the Supreme Court or to another venue, I guess maybe the Court of Appeals, and asking that they be ordered for the second time to produce?
Well, they don't have them anymore. The federal government has them now.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think they're gonna, if not, they've done so already. The FBI and DOJ, I'm confident, have probably concluded examining those ballots. They've had them since January, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a report coming out soon.
We'll get right back to the show after this brief word from our sponsor, Masculine Man Essentials. Look, most deodorants on the shelf are full of aluminum, parabens, and synthetic junk. Masculine Man Essentials goes at it differently. All natural ingredients, built for men, and it actually holds up through the whole day long. Whether you're at the office, at the gym, in traffic, or just getting home for the night, try Masculine Man Essentials. I've been using it, and I can tell you, it's the real deal. Head to masculinemanessentials.com, grab yourself a 2-pack or a 4-pack, use the promo code TRUTH at the checkout to save on your first order, and the link is in today's show notes. As you know, we don't put our name on anything that we haven't tried and believe in. So when I tell you about Nessa's Hemp, I want you to listen up. Nessa's Hemp is a Chicago-based company that makes hemp, and it was founded by Anessa. And what she's built is really something. We're talking about clean, high-quality hemp products with no gimmicks, just real ingredients, real transparency, with real results. Whether you're dealing with stress, sleep issues, inflammation, or you just want to add something natural to your wellness routine, Nessa's Hemp has something to offer you. Head over to nessahemp.com, that's NESAS hemp.com, and check out what they've got. Use our promo code TRUTH for a discount just by being our listener. Well, I spoke to Carrie Lake earlier today, and we talked about the frustration that I sense, and I'm sure that you all do as well, from the American people, that we continue to uncover evidence of these crimes and unethical, and in many cases immoral activity from people in high positions in government, and there seems to be a lack of accountability. Now, I've got all 300 or 400 pages of the document dump that President Trump allowed the American people to see last night. I haven't gone through even half of it, but I'm in process of. But it seems to me that this is evidence of direct involvement from Clapper, Comey, Brennan, and Christopher Wray. I'm sure there will be more. Do you think that we will ever see accountability from these people? Because I think do you share my view that, and I'll ask you, Dr. Jan, that this is worse than just electioneering? It seems to me that they were either enabling or working in collaboration with a foreign nation that was inappropriately, unlawfully meddling in our elections. To me, that is treason on its face. Shouldn't they be investigated for treason?
I think as the president said last night, he is directing further investigation, and that's to be determined. Uh, but it should absolutely be looked into. And if there has been meddling, or if there has been manipulation, or there has been interference, then people need to be held accountable.
I think that's what the American people are starting to wake up to, the reality of these things, starting with the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Building 7, Epstein, Butler, and then Charlie Kirk's assassination. Many people, including myself, believe that Intel's fingerprints are on all of that. And I've advocated for 4 years on this program that there needs to be a cleansing in America, that all the secrets need to come out and be revealed. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, and that we've got to restore this country to the moral high ground. Bob, what say you?
I absolutely agree, and I was I was invited in 2022 to meet with a small group of people who are these are lawyers, along with a special ops, retired special ops specialist, and he told us about going to Venezuela and finding the code writers who had written the software for these electronic voting systems. That Hugo Chavez initially commissioned them to do this so that he could stay in power, and then Maduro continued to use it to stay in power. So it's going to be interesting to see what Maduro may have agreed to confess his knowledge of after he was captured earlier this year and is now in jail in Manhattan. But I was blown away with what the special ops guys said about this was a global attack and manipulation by Venezuela, and the software that they authorized to be used, and that was being used in the United States, and this guy says that they could determine the outcome of an election by switching votes in small amounts in every county across the country, and so that it would not stand out and it would be almost impossible to audit. He said that the votes were counted overseas, I believe in Serbia, on Chinese servers, and it just doesn't smell right. I mean, why are we having our votes counted anywhere except in the precincts where the votes are cast? It makes no sense.
Well, if all of that together, when you put it together, it looks to me that it is tantamount to a provocation of war on our country, and I think it should be met with tremendous resistance. I have not until today gone so far as to say, even though my instincts have told me since 2020 that COVID did not happen by accident. It happened in conjunction with the 2020 election, as you will recall, and it really paved the way for so many of the things that allowed for election fraud to take place, like the drop boxes and like the millions of absentee ballots that were dumped on voters that never requested them, like me and my wife. We never requested an absentee ballot, yet we each got them in the 2020 election. And my instinct has told me that COVID was intentional. And I know that that is a strong leap of logic or faith. But when you look at all the attendant circumstances and the things that happened as a result of COVID, and you combine it also with the lies that we were told. Fauci told us that COVID originated in a bat cave 2 hours away from Wuhan. The lady who was a scientist at Wuhan, who was starting to talk about COVID, suddenly disappeared in the middle of the night and has never been seen since. And then Fauci also told us about social distancing and masking. And it was all just one narrative based on lies. Then the other thing that struck me pretty dramatically was that I've learned that Moderna worked on a COVID vaccine starting in 2015. Then when you look at how fast the pamphlets, the literature, the vaccination centers just popped up overnight, I've never seen our federal government move that fast on anything. I'm just saying, when I step back at 30,000 feet and look at it, it feels planned, orchestrated, and intentional. Do you want to call the medics now or wait?
Dial 911.
Yeah.
John.
Well, we'll see. I think that my belief, my hope is that, I'm sorry. Did you say something, Dr. Jan?
Oh, yes. Well, I would say, yes, dial 911. Call an emergency. This is critical.
For my mental health or for the nation?
For the nation, for elections.
Yeah. Yes,
Right.
Absolutely. So,
One thing, John, let me also add, I was told by somebody in the administration, current administration, that they had figured out how the voter rolls were being manipulated in several Secretary of State's offices. And I know for a fact, I've got the name and of the person that was allowed to come into the Georgia Secretary of State's office in July of 2020 and was given unfettered access as an outside person, not hired or under contract with the Secretary of State's office, but to do anything that would benefit the Secretary of State. But this person was given access to the main voter registration list for the entire state of Georgia. And when asked what he was doing by some curious people there in the Secretary of State's office, he said that he was reviewing to find all the people who had not voted in the last two presidential election cycles. And turns out that it looks like he reactivated all these people, even though the people didn't ask to be reactivated. And there were several 100,000 people that fit that category. So we now know that he reactivated them all. He gave them new voter ID numbers. And who knows, he may have given them new addresses as to where they should have absentee ballots sent.
Like abandoned apartment buildings and homeless shelters, maybe?
Well, large apartment communities where it's hard to figure out who lives where. So I think that that's something that the FBI is really looking into in Georgia and also these other states. And I was told back in January of 2025 that they had figured out that how they were, some of the computer experts had figured out that that's one of the ways in which they were able to manipulate votes and cast votes in the name of people who may have died or moved or just become apathetic and didn't want to vote.
Wasn't that guy you're talking about in the SOS office from a foreign country?
Yes.
Do you remember what country?
I think it was Jordan.
And what about in the Fulton Board of Elections office? Didn't they have foreign actors working there?
Yeah, I think they had somebody from Haiti.
Yeah.
Who was not a U.S. citizen.
All right. So when we step back and we look at this, what does all this say about our constitutional officers in Georgia? Kemp, Raffensperger, Carr. I mean, surely they've got responsibility for this, don't they? And what does it say about them? And what accountability are they deserving of?
John,
Well,
let me say a few words. My concern is that over the last more than 10 years, there's been a systematic degradation of secure elections by passing laws that make elections less secure, that include things like extended early voting and absentee ballots that can be used with no excuse, and election days that don't end at 7 p.m. on election day, where ballots can be accepted after the end of the election. And this has been legislated and systematically changed to the extent that the United States of America appears to be almost like a third world country in the realm of elections. It's very loose, and the rest of the world looks at the United States with a jaundiced eye concerning how we conduct our elections. They're just too loose. So, and they're perhaps, according to the report last night, which is quite alarming, there are enemies from outside the U.S., but there are also enemies within the U.S. that need to be asked some hard questions. And we need to move back immediately to secure election standards. We need to know exactly who is eligible to vote for every election. That's an accurate and current voter roll. We need to know actually who votes in each election with a documented record of who is voting. I mean, a handwritten contemporaneous document in person. We need to have voting in person and only rare, unusual exceptions for voting by absentee. And we need to have an accurate accounting of how many ballots are cast. It has to equal the number of people who actually have proven to come in and vote. So if you don't have that, you don't have an election at all. And that includes hand-marked paper ballots. We need to get rid of the electronic voting systems. They're proprietary. They are against Help America Vote Act standards. The voter can't verify that he's actually voted because there's a barcode or a QR code that's actually being used to tabulate his or her vote.
And that violates state law on its face, does it not? Doesn't the law say that an elector has to be able to verify the ballot that they've cast?
Yes, it's a federal law too. I mean, this is basic election conduct. And finally, there need to be real audits, not pretend audits or theater type audits. There need to be real audits that are conducted by independent parties. How can you audit yourself? How can a county audit itself, or perhaps even the Secretary of State conduct the audit of itself? You need somebody that's at arm's length conducting the audit of the ballots and the equipment and the process. Plain and simple.
Well, both of you have worked tirelessly and selflessly to help get the truth on the 2020 election and subsequent elections. And you've both paid pretty high prices, haven't you? Dr. Johnston, you were attacked, basically, that resulted in some high legal bills that you had to pay on your own, I believe.
Well,
Tell us briefly about your experience.
I'm just a little person. I'm not important. And yes, I was the subject of a bit of lawfare by the horrible thuggery group American Oversight out of Washington. And but I won the lawsuit, and no, I did not have to pay anything. But nevertheless, that's not the problem, is it? It's the process is the punishment, and
Yes.
it took a lot of time and effort to prepare But fortunately, I keep pretty good records. I'm an old doctor, so I keep good records. And so I prevailed, but other people have paid a much higher price. I'm pretty thick skinned and I have a strong ethical compass, even though even somebody in the state the awful group American Oversight and Kathy Woolard from a previous chair of the Fulton County Board of Elections filed an ethics complaint because I actually looked at President Trump at a rally. I think that's the silliest ethics complaint I've ever heard of. And the inspector general said, "Oh, that's an ethics violation. I think it's laughable."
Well, I would very
But
much like you to come back on The Truth and take us through that someday when you have the time.
right,
I know today is not the time, but Bob, you most certainly have paid both
he
personally
he
and
really has.
financially.
Yes.
Tell us about your being in this very exclusive club of the Trump 19 in Georgia.
Yeah, it was a shock. I was getting ready to fly to Alaska on a long planned fishing trip with my son, and I turned on the news in August of 2023, and I see that Trump has been indicted, and there's my picture. And I was like, what in the world? Why am I being indicted for just showing a desire to get to the truth by filing a lawsuit? But, it's just like the old infantry slogan that if you're firing over the target, then they're going to be coming after you. So I was firing over the target. I had secured by then a successful order to preserve the ballots and the envelopes, and then I had the case pending in front of the Georgia Supreme Court, which I won a few months later in December, where the court recognized that we do have standing as citizens to inspect ballots. So I know they came after me because they wanted to shut me up, and so I wound up spending about $1.6 million on lawyer fees to defend myself, and we, were successful in getting this Fani Willis disqualified in the appellate court for her, as the Judge McAfee found, she had a quote odor of mendacity, close quote, which basically means that she's lying when she testified in front of him, and he did not find her to be a credible person, and she was financially benefiting from these prosecutions. A prosecutor takes an oath not to accept any financial remuneration except that which is authorized by law. Well, she was paying her boyfriend, her paramour, who was married to someone else, all this money, and he was in turn taking her on, I think, 8 trips in 9 months. So I don't know how many, hardworking, law-abiding DAs take that many vacations in such a short amount of time, other than Fani Willis. So,
Well, did you mention the fact that she was paying him an exorbitant amount of money for the RICO experience that he lacked?
oh yeah, I mean, he was totally unqualified.
It seems to me and others that the taxpayers of Georgia paid for those extravagant trips, and leading me to just ask, why is she still a member of the Georgia bar?
Yeah, she's a disgrace.
Well,
she
she's
needs
not.
to-
You and Dr. Johnston are not the only people that have paid a price. Rudy Giuliani, who tried to defend the president and look into the 2020 election, paid a huge price. They stripped him of his license to practice law, including family heirlooms and a whole lot of money. The thousands of people that were imprisoned as J6 prisoners, insurrectionists, who have subsequently been pardoned, but they'll never get those 3 years of their lives, their reputations, and the money that it cost them back. Many of them lost their families, and some of them took their own lives. I think it is the lowest part, possibly one of the lowest parts, certainly in the 20th, 21st century of our country.
I agree with that.
Well, I'm indebted to
agree.
both of you for coming on. You're both welcome back anytime. Dr. Johnston, I'd really like to hear about your trials and tribulations with the American Oversight Group. And Bob, I'd welcome you to come back on anytime, and hopefully you will, because I think that last night was really, I have said this repeatedly. Our audience knows that I've said it, that I think that Donald Trump is very strategically and intelligently deconstructing the deep state. I think Russia was chapter 1 of the book. I think the 2020 election is chapter 2 of the book. I hope that we're going to get chapters 3 and 4 dealing with Butler and Charlie Kirk assassination in Utah. And I think both of you could be very valuable resources for our listeners. And you're welcome back anytime. And I just appreciate your coming on today. And I hope you both have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
Thank
you.
you.
for having
Just
us on.
remember all this corruption and the people that are behind it. They intend it for evil, but God's going to use it for good.
You gave me a quote out of the Bible yesterday. I think that would be an appropriate place for us to end today. I was saying that we are in such horrible times and that our government is corrupt and we've got bad people that are trying to do evil within our government. And how did we get into this place? And you really kind of helped me put it into perspective. Would you mind repeating that if you can recall?
Yeah, Moses in the book of Deuteronomy was inspired, by God to lay out government and the way it should be structured. There needs to be a separation of powers for civil functioning of government. And, the United States founders relied heavily on the book of Deuteronomy to structure our separation of powers. And it's worked, it's got deep historic roots in the Bible, and we've got to fight like hell to make sure that these crazy left-wing people don't move us towards communism. I'll leave everyone with this thought that I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, and I don't remember seeing anybody from West Germany trying to climb over the wall to get to East Germany.
That's a very good point. And doesn't the Bible also require each of us as citizens to do our part in our civic duty in maintaining our nation and, in our case, its freedoms?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We've been so blessed to be born in this country. Had like a less than 1% chance of being born here, and just the reaction that you're seeing during the World Cup, people coming here from all over the world, they realize we've got something incredibly special, and we shouldn't take it for granted. And we got to do a better job educating our children as to how special this country is, and to protect it and to love it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And my brief ending message for both of you and everyone listening is to wake up, sit up, stand up, speak up, and never, never, never give up for election integrity, for this country, and for the Republic.
Those are sage
Amen.
words from both of you, and I really appreciate it. And I don't know two more hardworking, better patriots than the two of you, Dr. Jan Johnston and Bob Cheeley from the Cheeley Law Group. Again, thank you for coming on with us today. And that is the truth. I'm John Gordon, back after these words.